We live now.
We live.
We live. What's up? I am so excited to have you, Avril. We done got through all our technical difficulties. We've been here for 30 minutes trying to just make sure we get signed on. And we just gonna pretend like we ain't been talking for like 30 minutes.
It's been a minute. It's been a minute.
It's been a minute. It's been a minute. Yo, I'm so glad to jump on with you. I started just sitting down with people that I admire and that I respect and people that I collaborate with a few months ago, just to sort of connect to my people, connect to just different people in my industry. Look, I'm gonna spill water all over my shirt. I was trying to look good and then I messed it up.
Look at you.
Just trying to connect with those on the path. I started the path of Shabazz really as a way to actually exit like typical social media, Instagram and all those things. I needed to find a space that was out of the kind of the hoopla. And really, the path of Shabazz has become this place where I document things happening in my studio, where I talk to friends, and it's really just kind of become this little world of exploration. And I'm so excited to have you, Avril, because we got to work on a project together. And before I even talk about the project that we worked together, I really just wanted to have an opportunity for the people to get to know who you are. The things that I will say about you, I'm going to let you speak for yourself. But the things I do know about you is that you're a rock star producer that works at Christians for Social Justice, Christians for Social Action.
Yes.
Action. I mean, justice would be but actually social action is even more important because action is action. And, not all action has to be justice oriented, but action is action. Before you were doing this, you were working on all kinds of like producing TV shows and stuff like that. So, I know everybody wants to know about that. So we're going to talk about that. We can talk about all this stuff. But how did you come to Christians for Social Action? How did you come to this? Tell me how you even got here.
Yeah, it's interesting because I spent most of my career as a filmmaker, as a director and a producer. And I don't know. I did a campaign for an organization called KPIC. It's the Coalition of Asian American Pacific Islander Churches.
They're gonna be mad at you, and I'm sending it to them too. I'm gonna send this to them.
I think the C is churches, coalition, churches.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I can't remember the C. But I did a project for them about voting. So this was back in 2024, and that's kind of how I first learned about Christians for Social Action. And so I did that project, and then I did another project for CSA about a tech company in the Bay Area who completely is rethinking finance and how businesses interact with communities. And it was just a really interesting and fulfilling experience that this was a Christian organization that was really being proactive and was centering the community and centering social justice and doing really cool, innovative things and innovative projects and kind of thinking outside of the box in terms of media. I think right before that, I was, like you said, I was producing television and film, and was also just kind of starting to feel a little bit in a rut of the industry. Everything is kind of done the same way, and also, but just there's so much going on in the world right now. It's like, how can I do something? And of course, there was this sort of lag in projects in the industry. Like, people, there's just not as many shows happening. So anyways, I started working with Christians for Social Action on kind of projects here and there. And then they told me about this Storytellers Collective that they are running. And they asked me to run the Storytellers Collective. And I thought, what a great way to sort of combine all of my interests in terms of film and television and storytelling, but also to be working directly with activists and people who are in the field and doing important things in the world, helping them to training them to tell their own stories.
Right.
And then we were telling stories ourselves. So.
Yo, I got a question. Like, what was it like going from, making shows for like Disney and whoever, Netflix and all that stuff, to like, hey, now I'm working with organizers and activists and things like that. What like kind of like just like what was the difference in like the KPI, like what did people want there and different from what people want here?
Well, it's definitely a difference in scope. So, with those bigger shows, you're used to having a whole team, both in the field and on the back end. So it's like you go out into the field, like you go on a shoot, and a crew can be anywhere from 8 people to, hundreds of people, depending on whether it's a doc or a fiction. And so working for a nonprofit, and then on the back end, you have people who are in the office who are supporting you. So, you have people who are doing production from an office in LA or New York or whatever, who are kind of doing the back end support work. So I think one of the biggest differences was, just having a way smaller team and having to kind of pick up a lot of that slack. So, you might be carrying your own life. You might be, editing yourself.
Humbling. It's a more humbling situation.
It's very humbling. But the cool thing is that, in a way, you kind of have a little bit more control or a little bit more say, on how projects go. I think the smaller and nonprofit is a little bit more willing to step outside of the box and be imaginative, and to let projects take on a life of their own. Which, even the project that we worked on together was kind of an example of that, of, something that started out as one idea, and then another idea was presented, and we had the ability, because it was, it's like a 3-person team that gives the green light. And so to say, yeah, that actually sounds pretty cool, and it's risky, but we, as an org, like we can take that risk. So let's go for it. Like, let's try something different and do a different medium.
Well, okay. So since you're talking about the story, you mentioned the Storyteller Collective, and I think that the project that we did is part of that. Like, what's going on with that? Like, I usually ask people, what are you working on right now? But I'm sort of gonna just like sort of back you and like tell me, like, I think are you still working on this? Is it still sort of happening?
It still exists. Yes. So the story.
Okay, tell me, what are you working on right now?
Right now, I'm working on the Storytellers Collective, which is most of my time. And the Storytellers Collective is it's a collection. It's a collective of stories. We're empowering people and empowering organizations to tell stories. We have 2 arms of the Storytellers Collective. One arm is where we give grassroots social justice workers and organizations an opportunity to tell their stories in their own words, tell the stories of their communities in their own words. And we usually work with 5 orgs every year. And we give them a small grant to tell a story. And when we say story, that's a broad definition, because that doesn't have to be a video. It can be a video, it can be a painting, it can be it can be anything. I think there's so many different placeholders for story. There's so many different ways to tell a story. So we give them a wide span of options on how to tell those stories. And then the second arm is that we, CSA, we produce stories as well about people, organizations who are doing extraordinary things in the world, and that have, concepts that we're trying to change behaviors or change, we're trying to stir the imagination. We're trying to stir the
Ah.
imagination on what's possible.
Yeah, I was
And
just thinking, like, why? Why are you doing this?
yeah,
What's the point of
yeah,
this?
yeah, that's a great question. And I think we like I said, we always want to stir the like we want to prompt people to think, how can I think about this differently? How do I think about money differently? How do I think about, history differently? Whatever the topic is, we try to, get at that. We try to angle it, and we try to, think about the process of it, and think about, what is it in this? We don't want to just tell, oh, that's a nice story. We want to tell, like, what within that is different, or can prompt people to think about something in a different way. So, like the example I gave with the tech company, for example, this is a company in the heart of San Francisco that is, they it's things like they only have 3 months of cash reserve. So after that, after they've made 3 months of, then they start thinking about, how do we reinvest the rest of that money back into the community? So, it's things like that you go, oh wait, that's odd, or that's still, they have what they call Isaiah 40 curve in terms of how they pay people. And those at the top, they're, it's like leveled out. It's equal, no matter whether you're a CEO or secretary, everyone is paid the same. And so, it's these principles that this company has. And so we thought that's something that we want to highlight, and that we want to do a video about that, in hopes that people will go, oh, maybe it's not those specific things for my company, but what can I be doing that's different for the community?
That's beautiful. So, man, that is a great story to tell, by the way. I mean, like, a big company that's actually sharing their profits. I mean,
Exactly.
man, I love an anti-capitalist story,
Yeah.
and that's sort of getting close. So, man, I thought that most of the stories were sort of Christian stories, or maybe that is somehow, or where does that sort of fit in? Is that
Yeah,
true?
it is. I mean, we're Christians for Social Action, so yeah, we do have that bent. Like most of our stories, they have that as a principle. And so even if you take that, the story I just mentioned, on Dayspring, the that idea and that concept, how they came to that decision to do that was
Sure.
from a biblical principle, and he kind of breaks down in the video. He breaks down, like,
Mm.
when Jesus gives the Sermon on the Mount, those are all economics. Like, he's talking economics, the last will be made first, the least will be the greatest, he's talking economics. So when, he kind of talks about it in that context.
That's so great. I think that, like, the thing that I've struggled with is I turn on social media, I turn on Instagram, I turn on the news, and there's so much sensationalist reporting, and of all the worst things in the world. And we got to know about these things. But at some point, there are moments where it's, here's information, and there are moments where, let me fuel the fire of sensationalism. And in that process, there is sort of like an exit from telling the stories of people who are actually doing things that can inspire me to be a better citizen, a better human, a better father. And so, there's a part here of the Storytellers Collective that kind of, I don't know, it kind of just like, is it that it inspires people? Is it that it, like, draws something out of people? Like, what is that?
Yeah, I mean, and I think the other part of it is, like, the other part of the collective that I mentioned is the cohort, right? And like that's part of the reason why we have that cohort, is because, we have resources, and we got this grant, as an org, but let's spread that out, and let's give some of that money to other orgs who are also telling stories in their communities. So, like, yeah,
Right.
we can tell a Dayspring story, but what's the org in Chicago that, you know, we had an org last year that was in the midst of ICE raids, you know, when that first started happening in Chicago, and that was happening right in the middle of our cohort. And so, like, we want to hear that story. We want to hear the story of those churches in that community who are fighting ICE. Do you know what I mean? And so,
Yeah.
I think it's like, to your point, these orgs are the ones that are the boots on the ground, and they have their ear to the ground, which is why we wanted to highlight those organizations and say, like, what's going on in your community? Like, you are the voice. And so it's partially like inspiration, but it is kind of, you know, information as well, because those organizations are saying, like, this is what's going on in our community.
Yeah.
And these are the stories that don't get told. These are stories that, you know, aren't going to get told in the news. They're not going to get told, you know, on these other platforms. But we're going to tell their story. We're going to tell the stories of our community, and we're going to share them out. And that's sort of the other part of this Storytellers Collective, is sharing the stories out. You know, it's among the groups, but it's also CSA and getting the word out about, you know, just what's happening in our communities.
Yeah. That's so fly. That's such an important work, especially because I feel like the storyteller is usually like the last one brought to the party. You know,
Yes.
it's like, let me do all this great stuff, and then let me go figure out how to tell the story. I
Right.
think that there's sort of like a lack of appreciation for, like, hey, we got to go tell people about the dope things that are happening, the good things. And I think that you're kind of like poking at the world, especially those who are in the circles of organizers and activists, to sort of like to see how important you know, the role of the storyteller is.
Yeah. I think you bring up a good point about, you know, oftentimes storytellers are invited in at the end to just reflect what happened, or just to reflect, you know, whatever the case. And, you know, but in so many cases, you know, it's like I said, I go back to this, you know, idea of stirring the imagination. And I often wonder, like, if storytellers, you know, when you have that opportunity to be at the table, you know, what can get stirred up, you know, when storytellers are, and that's fine to come in at the end as well. Like, that's a process, but it's also interesting.
Don't be nice. No, don't be nice.
No, because
don't be nice. Invite us in the beginning, y'all. Let me tell you an example. Let me tell you why. I just joined this thing called Mosaic Fellowship, and it's a really beautiful organization, and it's like training leaders throughout the South. And we said this. I was like, look, y'all need to bring the storytellers in early. Yeah. And then some people from this organization, they said, hey, look, we're doing this thing in Atlanta where we're teaching the youth about, like, civic engagement, how to get involved. And we went in, and I was like, it was like, but Shabazz, I heard you. You said you wanted to be invited to the table early. And I was like, okay. And they said, so we invited you to the table. What you gonna do? And I was like, oh shit, really? Oh, I don't know what to do. Oh, really? You listen to me? Oh, shoot. But then we came up with this idea, like, that was like using If I Ruled the World, imagine that, you know what I'm saying? Nas, Lauryn Hill, you know, and like, what would you imagine? How would you imagine the world? And there's this visual component, and it actually became the centerpiece of what we were doing. And that was such a powerful thing. And it kind of showed me, even though, like, in theory, I was like, bring us to the table early. In practicality, I learned actually you could create some really beautiful insight, because storytelling isn't just about recapping what happened. You know, storytelling is helping you know how you're a part of the story.
Right.
You know, the storytellers aren't just like, hey, we're the storytellers in the room. We're trying to empower everybody to be great storytellers. Right. Well, at least I think that we should be trying to do that.
Well, I would love for you to tell the story about the chair in light of that context, because you know what I mean? Like, I think that is also a good example of how, like, your influence early on completely the script of that project.
Okay, this is a crazy project, and I'm gonna show a little clip because you made such a beautiful video. I'm gonna show a little clip of what you made. Hold on, let me see if I could show it before I start talking about it. Let's see. Will it let me do that? Let's see here. Yeah, there it is. Okay, I'm gonna show a little clip.
Oh, there's no sound. Is there sound?
Oh, there's no sound?
Mm-mm. At
Oh,
least I don't hear any sound. I don't know if you hear it.
oh. Well, let me pause it right there, since I don't know if it is no sound or not. But you guys came to me and you said, "Hey, can you do a portrait? Can you do a portrait of like church leaders?" And I was like, yeah.
Well, and I think we should also put in the
Go ahead.
context.
You set it up.
It wasn't just church leaders. So what we're trying to do is expand the canon, right? So there's like, when people think about church, I think about Christians and social justice and history or whatever. You think Martin Luther King. You think there's like a handful of people that people probably could name, and so we're just trying to expand that, and particularly for people of color, like we're trying to expand who people talk about when you talk about church leaders, right? And so we spoke with a theologian who kind of picked 3 stories for us to highlight. And one, like, for example, Prathia Hall was one who inspired Martin Luther King's "I Have a Dream" speech. But so we had these profiles. So we had these 3, like, just like bios almost.
It was Prathia Hall. There was Anna Marie Douglas, and then there was the Soliloquy 15, which are the 15 pastors that got together and advocated for 40 acres and a mule.
Yes. And so we were like, this will be great. We'll have some portraits. Let's ask Shabazz Larkin to do some portraits for us.
Because that's what I do. I do portraits.
And then you take it from there.
You guys you do portraits. Everybody knows that I do portraits. And I'm like, yeah, great. But can I make a chair instead? But I was just thinking, and let's see if I could because I got some pictures. I was thinking, but can I just can I do a portrait of it in your mind? Like, is there a way, I had just gone to this museum and I heard the sound of Marcus Garvey talking, and it was such a inspiring thing. It was like, I've heard about Marcus Garvey my entire life, but I've never really understood him until I heard him. And I thought, whoa, that's a much better portrait of Marcus Garvey than just hearing from him. So I had this idea that what if I took these people from history and I heard their voice, but I'm not gonna just like, at first I was gonna do a painting and I was gonna have it like coming out of the painting or something. But then I had this idea that like, okay, like what if I put it in a chair? What if I had this chair and I put speakers inside the chair, and when you sat down, you could hear these voices. And you guys were like, yeah. I was like, I just knew you guys were gonna hate it, but you guys were so brave. Kudos to you guys for being so brave. We had this chair, and now it's touring around the country. It's going all kinds of places. And you sit down and you listen inside the chair. And what's beautiful is that I I use artificial intelligence to do the voice of Prathia Hall. Now, what's beautiful about Prathia Hall is here is this woman who's saying, I have a dream in a prayer meeting long before Martin Luther King ever says it on the stage. But no one knows who Prathia Hall is. She happens to be the first minister in the Baptist church or something like that. First female minister in the Baptist church, which is a big deal all on its own. But then, then she's the one who penned I Have a Dream. And Martin Luther King, somebody, unfortunately, there was like a church that was just bombed, or there was some kind of like bombing tragedy that had just happened. Martin Luther King showed up, and in the prayer meeting, she was saying, I have a dream that the young people are going to be okay, that they will have pride in who they are. I have a dream that they can look at themselves in the mirror and be okay. They wanted the Black kids to look at, she just wanted the Black kids to be able to look at themselves and not feel shame. But Martin Luther King picked up on that I Have a Dream part, and he was like, oh yeah, I heard you. I heard you. He's like, yeah, I got that. He stopped and started writing. But what a powerful thing, because I Have a Dream is arguably the most popular speech in American history, as far as I'm concerned. Maybe one other contender, Abraham Lincoln, was 7 years ago, maybe. But then there's I Have a Dream, to know that was actually written by a woman was such that it gives me chills to hear it. And so I went and I found as many quotes and ideas, and I researched everything that anybody ever said about that little prayer meeting. And I took everybody's little quotes, everything in that little dramatization were quotes from people, and a couple inserts. Because I've been in prayer meetings and I know how they sound. And then,
right. What a ministry! That's my favorite part of the thing.
What a ministry!
What a message!
Now that was actually her actual voice. So this was her voice, from an actual sermon that she had done when she said, "What a ministry!" That's actually her. But the sounds from the prayer meeting didn't exist. So to hear that, to sort of re-dramatize that with the help of some AI, I was the one speaking it, like I was the one praying, and then I had AI make it sound like her. And that was incredible. It's spooky to feel.
When you listen to it, it's insane. Like, I would not think that at all. But I also appreciate the amount of research and the amount of work and layers that you had to do. Like when you told us the process of how you went about doing that one. And also I think the Soliloquy 15 one, like that, the process that you went to create those voices, I thought that was a really, excuse me, I know that there's a lot of, debate about AI and like whether to use it and so on and so forth. But I thought that was a really innovative way to kind of use it as a tool that to enhance something in a creative way. But it required so much, like there were so many steps that were involved in pulling that off.
That was a really, I think that was a really sort of like beautiful use of that technology. So that was really lovely. And then the Anna Marie Douglas one was interesting because there's no words from her. There's only one quote that she has, and I think it's something to the effect of like, why not I suffer so that my people might be free? And that was it, which speaks to our times right now, because I think that a lot of us are sort of living in this world where Voting Rights Act is being taken away, where they're gerrymandering our communities. They're splitting apart immigrant families. My family was immigrant family. they are doing so many horrible things are happening in the name of America, in the name of God, even and some points that we just kind of believe it. We slide by thinking that this is what it's always been. This is what it's got to be. But our ancestors worked really hard to get us these rights that we've been enjoying. And to this quote really sort of invites us to take on that itself, that why not I suffer so that my people might be free? And instead of re-dramatizing anybody, I just took those words and just repeated them over and over and over so that you can hear them, so that you can process. We only got one quote from Anne Marie Douglas, and I said it probably 50 times, so that you can meditate on that. You know, and actually internalize it. And one of the things that you guys asked was like, hey, is there a way that this can become a practice somehow? And I was like, yeah, let's turn it. One of these is gonna turn into a meditation.
Yeah.
Well,
I was going to say that was another thing about the chair that I really loved and appreciated as well, is that you did these sort of wraparounds in between each story. And there's like these meditations in between, you know, each one. It's like sit, listen, meditate on these words. It's very, you know, when I first sat in the chair, that was a part of the whole thing that I didn't expect. Like, you know, I knew we had the stories and everything, and I knew, you know, you had the voices and all, but I didn't expect those interludes. And I think that really just kind of sets the tone for people to sit and listen, to take time out. You know, it's interesting. One thing we found about, you know, like you said, the chair has been traveling all around the country, and, you know, it's a learning experience for us. I feel like we keep learning different things about habits, you know, and people's habits for engaging with something like this. And one of the things we're seeing is, it's so difficult for us to focus and sit for long periods of time. Our attention span is all over the place. And one thing that the chair does is it forces you to, you know, and even the first, for example, the first place that we had was in Nashville, which I think you came to that that exhibit, and we had the chair kind of facing the wall, so it was like away from everyone else. So it's like once you sit in that chair, you're forced to leave the world behind, in a sense, you know, leave your phone behind, tune out the other conversations, just sit and listen and be present for the time being and hear these stories. And I think that having it as a chair, as opposed to a portrait, invites people into that space to cultivate that discipline of sitting and something as simple as sitting and listening, which is that I know I have a hard time doing that sometimes. But I think as a society, it's become increasingly.
It's hard. It's hard, but you know, the thing that I love about it as well is that one person experiences this at a time. And in a world where everything is like, how many people can see this? How do I get 1,000 people? And I remember talking just like, hey, is there a way that we can get like a room of people? I'm like, we could, but y'all were so brave to say, all right, well, you know, there's an intimacy with just when I can hear the story. You know, it reminds me, it's like I'm sitting with another person. How many times when you sit with another person, you hear a story exchanged this way? There's that intimacy and I think that that's the reason why the Prathia Hall thing gives me chills every time I hear it, is because it just feels like I'm being let in on something that maybe I'm not supposed to. And I'm there and I'm just experiencing it in a different way. And time changes it. The longer I sit there with it, the sort of like, you know, it just kind of pulls me into it. So kudos to you all for for doing that. You know, the one thing that I wanted to share today is that that I've been studying sort of the ecosystem of change, and you and I talked about this, is that there's lots of people in the ecosystem of change. And I discovered this in this fellowship that I told you about earlier called Mosaic Fellowship. And there's sort of like a few types of people, you know, and I don't remember them all, but I think that they're like the builder, there are the weaver, there's the visionary, there are caretakers, there are disruptors, there are weavers, there are a few other of them, but one of them is the storyteller. And I remember the exercise that we did is we all split up in a room and we all decided, okay, which role am I? And I never realized that, man, I'm a storyteller. I have a lot to say about storytelling, and this is my life's work. And there's something about realizing that I don't have to do everybody's job in the room, that I have to do mine. My job as the storyteller, that helps to sort of like propel the work that I'm doing. And it was a great exercise because then I spoke as the storyteller in the room to the visionary, and the visionary spoke to the builder, and the builder spoke to me, back to me, and we got to sort of interact with each other. And it really sort of helped me to just nestle in on why that's important. And so that's a really beautiful thing. In fact, I'll tell you this, that, a few years ago, I started a magazine called the Museum of Presence. I brought it here actually, which is a magazine, which is really dope. It's got all these sort of like lovely things. And it was sort of my way to sort of like sit sort of mindfulness people who were like into like therapy and wellness in the room with artists and talk about like what's happening in our communities and our neighborhoods. And this has been such a beautiful work where I'm sort of working and acting as a storyteller. But in the last few years, I have sort of, I would say in the last few months, since the election, I've really been sort of closing my eyes to the news because I can't really see. I was feeling sort of sad and apathetic towards all the things that are happening. But then it sort of actually inspired me to do something more with this. When I learned about the storytelling thing, it sort of inspired me to like actually build something new. And so I'm actually starting to work on a new publication called The Power, which is really actually just about putting storytellers together to say, hey, you've got this power of storytelling, of this to be a creative, to be an artist. And what happens when we give the power to the artists and creatives and the organizers to sit together in the room and start talking about what's happening in our neighborhoods, what's happening in our communities, what's happening with the policy? How do we get power? Who's got the power? And what do we do with the power? Right now, and when it comes to power, people try to talk about civics, they talk about politics. It goes over your head. You either getting me angry or you make me want to shut my ears because you're corny, because you're irrelevant, or because you're not making it putting it in my hands.
Explain,
And so this project that we did together, this chair, plus sort of learning, it really is an instigator for me. And I really haven't a chance to give you the flowers for this, Avril, because this has really sort of inspired this new work that I'm doing to do this magazine that really sort of is meant to talk about power, to unpack power, and really sort of examine like how just rudimentary things like how do I run? If I wanted to run for office, what do I got to do? I mean, I know I could just put my name on a ballot, but like, how much money do I got to raise? What's a reasonable amount of money to raise money to be a city council member, for instance?
Yeah.
How does one even get started in like understanding who is my city councilman? Why do I got to vote for him? Why do I got to vote at all? What about the people who don't vote? What kind of power are they exercising?
Yeah. It's so funny you mentioned that because I thought about that during the last election, the primary election that we had here in California, as I was going to cast my ballot, especially as I was going through all of the measures. Like when you go through the measures and things like the judges, and there's all these things on the back half of a ballot
Mhm.
that people have no clue what that is. We talk, we don't really talk about the midterms as much as we talk about presidential elections, but then all of those local elections, there are all of these positions, the superintendent of, you know what I mean? Like, we don't talk about these things. And I thought, there's got to be some way to break this down and make people understand just what the value is. And also, what does it mean to vote for a public defender versus, you know what I mean? Like, if someone is in this position, what is likely about that person? Or, you know what I'm saying? Like,
Mhm.
I think that there's elements of the political process that, it's like you said, are just very over the head, but like how that affects power and how that affects change. I'm curious, for you, as you're thinking about this new venture, and also you mentioned, in in the Mosaic Fellowship, all these different roles and realizing your role as a storyteller. I'm wondering if you can unpack that a little bit more in terms of like, what is the role of the storyteller? Um, and what I mean by that is like, what are we doing as storytellers? Are we
Mhm.
sharing? Are we yeah, like, as
Yeah.
we sit in the room in the midst of all of these other roles,
Mhm.
um, what is that role? Because I also think it's something I struggle with sometimes, because having come from, you know, the Netflix world and everything, but also just like the film world, and for so long, it's always you're described as like, you're a producer, you're a director. And several years ago, I was like, I'm a storyteller, and I started just like calling myself a storyteller. And it was interesting, like, once I kind of made that distinction, then the Storytellers Collective comes about, and I'm kind of seeing this position and role in a whole new way. So I'm just curious, what that looked like for you.
It's like I'm gonna respond to there's two parts to this question, and like I'm gonna respond to the second part first. And say, you know, technical skills is a revolving door,
Mm,
right? So like someday I'm drawing pictures, someday I'm making sculpture, someday I'm making film, someday I'm making a chair. And that's just like coming from like 20 years as a creative director. Every single project requires something different. So I kind of bring that vibe wherever I go. And I think that like when you kind of step out of the sort of like the little details of what you do, like really you could tell stories in any kind of way. And so I really respect you realizing, okay, so today I'm a producer, tomorrow I might be director. You certainly directed the video that you shot with me. I might be an interviewer, I might be an instigator, but they're all sort of like different. They're all just telling stories. They're all helping to get to, which is the other part of your question, which is the role of the storyteller helps connects us to our why.
mm,
And our world is ruled by data, and
mm,
everything that we know is data, 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 data. And I can spit to you data on data. And that's what our elected, some of our sort of like people, they try to do. They try to gain our support by spitting data and
mm,
just like, okay, well, you see that there's, but
mm.
when you look at the data, you realize that this sticky note here is, if this sticky note here is all the people in the world, 90% of the wealth of the world exists in this little tiny triangle,
Right.
right? But until you see it like this, you don't understand. Why would
Mhm.
are these people have 90% of the money in all of the world?
Right.
All of us, I'm like right here somewhere. And all
Right.
of my cousins and everybody I know is just over here. All
Right.
us are over here. All of
Yeah.
us,
Yeah.
which is wild. It's a
Wild.
wild thing. And so I think that like this isn't fair.
Mhm.
When I paved the roads, when I paid for the roads for these people, when I paid taxes for them to get all the things that made that possible, why
Mhm.
is it that they're not sharing with all these other people? Why do these people have 90% of the if we
Right.
took 20% of these people's income, we could solve world poverty. We could
Right.
everybody could have a universal income. Like, but until you make it plain like this, so you can see it. Nobody, you know, until I could connect those statistics that everybody already knows to something that I care about. Until you could tell me the story about how in the 70s or 80s they finally came to a conclusion with the Sioux Nation and said, hey, we're going to give you the biggest payout for stealing all of your Native American land. We're going to give you $978 million. And they were like, no. We were looking at them Native Americans like, what? You create the biggest payout in history. Guess what? Elon Musk makes $975 million a day. Literally, Google it. A day. And they were trying to pay it for the entire Sioux Nation, for stealing their land.
That's
they
crazy.
Came to a conclusion that the land was stolen, and they were giving Elon Musk's 1 day salary for it. For the road, come on. So, anyways, until you can feel now it comes down to my level. You know, when you connect me to the why, the storytellers are the ones that help you to when I tell my story. You know, when I make it relevant, the thing that makes you like your heart jump out. Stats don't do that. Data don't do that. They make me like, oh, interesting. But like the storyteller makes you act now. You know, you know, the storyteller, especially in a social justice, social action context, is the craft of learning how to tell your story, is the craft of calling people to action. And so the things that you're making is sort of compelling people to say, so anyways, I see my friend Brian Zuck. Hi, Brian. He's adding things into, I don't know if I can open it up right now, but that looks good. If anybody has questions, y'all can add your questions in. But I think I kind of responded. I kind of went on the soapbox. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Avril.
No, I think that's great. And I agree with that in terms of, you know, the storytellers being the one to kind of bring the human element, the human story out and make you feel it and make you understand it. Like when you just drew that picture, you know, of the little triangle in the top, it makes it so real and visceral. And so for a lot of people, that's how things become, it starts to feel relevant, you know, and it starts to, you know, that's how it hits home. Is through art and through story. The other thing I think about too is, you know, the thing I've been thinking about is, you know, story. We were talking about like reflecting, giving us that moment to sit with something, to sit with an emotion, to sit with a fact, to sit with it and think about it and think about how to act. I actually, if I can, I want to read this.
Please. This
quote from. So we with our Storytellers Collective, we also have a partnership with a songwriting team called Common Hymnal, or Common People, they're known as now. But and they write songs for the Storyteller Collective. They each of them have stories. They get paired with a songwriter. And so we have an album. So check out our album if you go to our website. But at any rate, we just had you know, another songwriting retreat last week, and I was talking to someone there, and they brought up this blog post that's on their site about movements and how it's called "When Memory Has a Voice." And there's this one paragraph that I've just been thinking about all week, and it says, Movements do not become durable through urgency alone. And it's talking about how there's so much urgency. Like there's a shooting, you grieve one shooting, and there's another shooting, and then there's some executive order, and then the next thing you know, things are happening so fast, and there's such an urgency that happens. We go from one tragedy to the next tragedy to the next. And so it says movements do not become durable through urgency alone. They need memory. They need songs, stories, rituals, images, prayers, performances, and places where grief can be held, courage can be renewed, and truth can become portable. That is not a soft idea. It is one of the practical realities of how human beings survive history. We do not carry meaning in spreadsheets alone. We carry it in melody, story, testimony, ritual, image, atmosphere, and the rooms where something true was finally said out loud.
Woo.
And that just, it hit me. And I feel like I've been reflecting on that and kind of breaking that down, because there's a lot in that paragraph. And I feel like I've been kind of taking bit by bit and like, and reflecting on those pieces. But I think, yesterday I was reflecting on that element of something true finally being said out loud. And I think so often art and stories are kind of speaking these truths that we're not able to articulate, that are on the inside, that, I think there's a lot of people, going back to your illustration, like, your drawing on the sticky note. There's a lot of people who are like, I can't pay my rent. That's not fair. I can't pay my rent, or I can't buy groceries. There's something about this that's not right. But for some people, they're just trying to live day to day. They're just trying to get by every day. And so even that reality, what we were talking about earlier, the connection of, your ballot and how you're voting, it doesn't always connect. And so, so as storytellers, we're speaking that truth out loud. Like, yes, it's hard, but here's a little graphic to help you understand why it's so hard. And like, with CSA, we're always talking about gospel hope, or like, what is the hope? What is the thing? The hope for me in that graphic that you just drew is that big space. There's a lot of us.
A whole lot of us
in that big green space, and like, what can we imagine? What does it look like for us to change how we think about money? What does it look like for us to, think about history, think about different people in history who give us something that we can take away for today, And to me, that's where the hope lives, in that big space of what is possible, what is possible for the future.
I gotta say, it's elephant in the room for me, Avril. Like, I think that this is the part that might get us all in trouble, so buckle up. I think that, like, right now, the Christian movements in America are synonymous with white supremacist, nationalist, January 6th type energy.
Yeah.
And obviously that's not every person within the Christian movement. But, as a whole, this is the feeling toward that. And, it's not like in my parents' day, where the Black Christian church was, at the center of creating a lot of change and applying their faith toward how I believe in our country, our democracy, how I can believe that I can actually, in fact, change. And I think that it's just really refreshing to be sitting down with you, and the work that you and CSA is doing. That is not that. It's not this sort of nationalistic thing, but it's sort of like hearkening some of the best of what I think faith communities can be, which is not just singing songs. Like on one of the things on your website is like praise and protest. to sort of like, how does my faith lead me to make the world better, instead of using my faith to divide us, to
Yeah.
sort of entrench bigoted ideas, and yeah. So I don't know. I think that I'm just bringing. Do you experience this sort of like juggling this of like, hey, when people hear, oh, you work for a Christian organization, like, but what is it like sort of being the last kid in the room who's got some heart?
Yeah. I mean, I'll speak for myself. I'm not, speaking for CSA here. I'm speaking for myself, but I definitely feel that on a personal level, this sort of on a personal level, I feel this need to kind of separate, to like, no, we're not talking about that. That's a whole other thing, because honestly, I don't even identify that as Christian, and one of the things that I appreciate about CSA is kind of, I don't think our mission right now is like, we're going to combat Christian nationalism. I actually know someone whose theory is like, when you try to combat, I hope I say this correctly in terms of her thesis, but trying to make statements against Christian nationalism is actually feeding Christian nationalism. We'd rather just focus on what did Jesus actually say, like what is actually in scripture, and just kind of turn the direction that way. But yeah, I mean, there is that sort of tension on what quote unquote Christianity has become in the public eye and in the public sphere. I experienced that even in my own faith and in my own personal walk. I have left the church in many ways because of that. I don't the church, the building, because there's just a lack of safety in that regard, so I think like I said, speaking for myself, I'm very grateful for this work, and I'm grateful for places like CSA. And I'm also grateful that I get to work with all these orgs who are feeling the same way, and just knowing that, like, beyond CSA, there's other organizations out there too that, still hold on to some faith. We don't, at CSA, we don't have, we don't ask anyone to subscribe to any type of theology, whatever you believe about God or about, you don't have to believe in one specific version of Christian theology. There's many people that have different beliefs. And I love that. I love that these people share a semblance of faith, but are all pursuing it differently and are all pursuing it differently in their communities. And it might be through the environment for one group. For one group, it might be through immigration. Through another group, it might be through the voices of Black women or Indigenous women or Asian American women. So there's just such a variety of voices of people who are all like-minded. And that brings me a lot of just hope. It just brings me a lot of hope that, you said we're not the last kids in the room. There's others out there. We still may be few and far between in terms of that big space that you have out there, but we're out there and we're spread out, we're all over. So,
well, the work that you're doing is definitely sort of like contextualizing this part of the journey of being a faith person, the journey of being in someone that believes in God to sort of believe that actually, hey, I can make the world better, and sort of like really live by some of the teachings of Jesus, which is a really beautiful thing. I've had such beautiful conversations with everybody that I've met in the organization, and that's so rare. It's so rare. I really love what you guys are doing. Thank you, Kristen. Appreciate you. The staff, and all the things that are happening at Christians for Social Action, and even the work that you're doing, Avril. I think that this is such a, it's a precious thing, and I hope that if there's any storytellers here that will see this. Are there any, after all the sort of storytellers that you work with, all the things that you've done, is there any advice, any parting words that you have for the storytellers out there that are trying to find this why, the human connection? And by the way, I love this idea of like, it's not about the urgency. It's about the songs that we sing and the prayers that we pray and the movies that we watch, until it's sort of like all around us, like it's not the urgency. It's the embodiment of a thing that sort of calls us to action, which I really believe in. I really love that you said that, you brought that into the room. For all those people out there, songwriters, writers, book writers, authors, whatever they're doing, painters, sculptors, what do you got to say to these people?
I would just, and this might be cliche, but I would just say stay true to your voice. And I think so much of, as storytellers, like, I think we spend a lot of time trying to find our voice even. And even for those of you who are still trying to find your voice or still trying to figure out what that looks like, keep working at it, and it's also an ongoing thing. But I think, you just got to keep at it, because that's what we need. We need your voice, and we need your specific voice in your specific way, whatever that looks like. So I would just say, stay true to it and keep working on it.
I love this. This is such great advice. And I think it's really hard to find, because this understanding how to be authentic is at the center of telling great stories. What I found is that, like, the things that I'm like, to look hard at the things that I'm like, well, I'm not going to talk about that. Obviously, I'm not going to talk about that. Obviously, I'm not going to talk about, my weird looking toe. I'm not going to talk about that. Actually, Shabazz, we should probably start at your weird looking toe for this one. The thing that is just, obviously, it's not about that. A lot of times our greatest stories are in there, and maybe not in some epic story of you meeting Mike Tyson on the corner somewhere. Yeah, maybe it's not that, it might be your weird toe. So, and that's what I've learned, that sort of like trusting that my story, the story of my sort of very common and generic block, that actually has significance. The story of my weird story about with alopecia, where I lost all my hair. Actually, that's the shit people want to hear. The story of, like, my awkward, obsession with history. Whatever it might be, if it's real to me, it's real, and that's where a good story is.
Yeah.
Not just that I grew up in a little town, but that I grew up in a town where there was a church next to a little white house that had like dirty grass, and that I was surrounded by Jamaicans and my cousins. You want to hear the gushiness, the specificity of my story is what makes it great. Of your story is what makes it great.
Exactly.
So I love this sort of authenticity piece. And I'm learning all these kinds of things myself as a storyteller. So I appreciate you offering that advice.
If I could just say one thing, just to that point, one thing I learned from producing is whenever we would pitch, and there were, you're pitching a project, and I work with directors, so you're always kind of going in the room, and there's that time when they ask the director to speak, and the pitches that get the most traction and interest are when people are able to tell their story, not the thing you wrote or the thing, that you came in there, is actually saying like, this story is based on my own story, and being
Yep.
able to tell that. So oftentimes people walk into the room and they just want to get down to business and say, I wrote this movie and it's going to make $10 million and da, 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 da. And it's like, no. People want to hear your story. They want to know how you're connected to it. And I find that those have been some of my best meetings, have been the ones where people are able to get specific and talk about their authentic voice and how they come into the story. So.
Okay, so Avril, part 2 conversation is how do we pitch a show to Netflix?
Oh God. All right, yeah, that'll be part 2.
You think I'm joking? You said you agreed to it here. I'm having a whole conversation with you right here. Get prepared, okay? In a few months' time, we're gonna run this back, and you're gonna teach everybody how to pitch. You don't want to show on Netflix. At least I do anyway.
Fair enough.
I'm a fantastic host. You know what I'm saying? Like someday I want to host the Emmys. I don't need the Oscars. Just let me just do the Emmys. You know what I'm saying? Like, let me host somebody's podcast. I don't know.
You're a great host, by the way.
Can you please tell your Netflix friends? I mean, like, what are we waiting on? Thank you. Anyways, all right. Thank you, Avril. I appreciate it. Thank you for everybody that showed up. Thank you, Brian and Kristen and Heidi and Bob and Mariah and Sally and Ray and Mo. Appreciate y'all all for joining, and everybody else who's going to watch this later. Thank y'all for joining in. And we've got Avril Speaks and for Christians for Social Action. And that's it.
Thanks, Shabazz.
All right. Peace.